there's an invisible line that separates talent from genius, and another, even more dangerous one, that separates genius from self-sabotage. What if I told you that one of the most skilled players in the history of the NBA lives exactly at that crossroads? How can a clutch champion, responsible for one of the coldest shots in NBA Finals history, also be one of the most controversial names of his generation? We're talking about Kyrie Irving. A player capable of making the ball look like it obeys the laws of another universe, but also an athlete whose journey raises an unsettling question. Was he misunderstood? Or did he sabotage his own greatness? Today you're going to dive into the mind, the decisions, and the moments that shaped a career full of brilliance and fractures. And before we keep going, drop a like, because this video might challenge what you think you know. Comment below. In your opinion, is Kyrie a victim of circumstances or the architect of his own destiny? And if you love deep NBA stories, subscribe to the channel, because here we don't just talk about stats. We talk about the soul of the game. Few players in recent history provoke emotions as extreme as Kyrie Irving. For some, he's the ultimate artist of modern basketball, a magician with the ball in his hands. For others, a talent that never managed to sustain enough stability to build a dynasty. The duality begins at the highest moment of his career, Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals against the historic roster of the Golden State Warriors. With less than a minute left, the score tied. He calls for the isolation. He dribbles, creates space, and hits one of the coldest shots in the history of the NBA Finals. That shot wasn't just 2 points. It sealed the first championship in franchise history for the Cleveland Cavaliers and delivered a title to a city that had waited more than 50 years. Alongside LeBron James, Kyrie looked destined to dominate the league for years. But what should have been the beginning of a dynasty turned into the start of an unexpected rupture. Trades, internal conflicts, team changes, controversial statements, and decisions that always sparked questions. How does someone capable of shining under the highest pressure imaginable become associated with instability? That's the essence of the contradiction. Kyrie was never just a basketball player. He always wanted to be more than that. And maybe that's exactly where the conflict between transcendental talent and silent self-sabotage begins. Before the controversies, before the headlines, before the breakups, there was only raw talent. Since his days with the Duke Blue Devils, even with a college season shortened by injury, it was already clear that Kyrie Irving was different. Selected as the first overall pick in the 2011 NBA draft by the Cleveland Cavaliers, he entered the league with something you can't teach: absolute control of pace. His ball handling wasn't just technical, it was artistic. Veteran defenders looked like amateurs facing hesitations, spins, and changes of direction that were almost impossible to anticipate. Statistically, he has always ranked among the most efficient offensive point guards of his generation, averaging over 20 points per game for most of his career and posting seasons above 40% from three-point range. But numbers only tell part of the story. What truly set Kyrie apart was the aesthetic of the impossible. He finished at the rim against much taller players using angles that seemed to defy physics, treating the backboard like a silent accomplice. His game felt like a mix of street ball improvisation and surgical precision. At the All-Star game, in the finals, or on an ordinary regular season night, there was always the sense that something extraordinary could happen. And when the game-winning shot in 2016 happened, it wasn't a surprise to anyone who had followed his journey. Kyrie Irving didn't train to be good, he trained to be inevitable. And in that moment, it looked like we were witnessing the birth of one of the greatest point guards in history. The problem is that offensive genius doesn't guarantee emotional stability or collective harmony. And that's exactly where the narrative starts to become much more complex. If on the court, Kyrie Irving seemed to control chaos, off it he often looked like he was provoking it. When he left the Cleveland Cavaliers, even after reaching 3 consecutive finals alongside LeBron James, the argument was clear. He wanted to lead his own team, step out of the shadow, and prove he could be the undisputed protagonist. The trade to the Boston Celtics was seen as the beginning of that new era. A young roster, historic tradition, a winning structure. But the promise of leadership quickly turned into tension. Contradictory public statements, subtle criticisms of teammates, and a disappointing elimination in the 2019 playoffs created irreparable fractures. The narrative began to revolve less around talent and more around instability. Then came the chapter with the Brooklyn Nets, where, alongside Kevin Durant, he seemed to form a modern superpower. On paper, it was unstoppable. In reality, injuries, prolonged absences, and personal decisions, including public stances that generated enormous backlash, fragmented the project. Kyrie always made it clear he didn't want to be just an athlete obedient to the system. He wanted to question, reflect, challenge narratives. For some, that's intellectual courage. For others, competitive distraction. The fact is that in a league where chemistry and continuity build dynasties, every rupture came with a cost. And the most intriguing part is that Kyrie never seemed to act out of carelessness, but out of conviction. The question then stops being, why did he do that? And becomes, how much does it cost to stay true to yourself in an environment that demands absolute alignment? This tension between authenticity and collective responsibility is the heart of the dilemma that follows his career. There is a silent truth in the National Basketball Association. Talent wins games, but stability builds legacies. And this is where Kyrie Irving's journey begins to weigh heavier. After the turbulent departure from the Boston Celtics and the unstable seasons with the Brooklyn Nets, the narrative around Kyrie stopped being about skill and started being about reliability. Recurring injuries, extended absences, and off-court controversies created an unavoidable question inside franchises. Is it possible to build a championship project around someone who won't always be available? In Brooklyn, the trio formed with Kevin Durant and James Harden looked like a perfect offensive equation. In the few games they actually played together consistently, the team posted a historic offensive rating, practically unstoppable in the half-court. But the key word was few. In 2 seasons, the trio barely had a healthy stretch. Harden left. Durant was traded. The super team became a case study in unmet expectations. Kyrie kept producing elite numbers, seasons above 27 points per game, absurd efficiency and clutch time, shooting percentages, flirting with the 50-40-90 club. But the collective feeling was one of wasted opportunity. Then came the trade to the Dallas Mavericks, forming a duo with Luka Doncic. Another chance, another reset. The pattern, however, had already been established. Every new chapter arrived carrying hope and skepticism in equal measure. The price of genius is high when it challenges structures, because in the NBA, it's not enough to be brilliant for 48 minutes. You have to sustain trust over entire seasons. And maybe Kyrie's greatest opponent was never a defender on the court, but the accumulated weight of his own choices. The story isn't over yet, and maybe that's exactly what makes everything even more fascinating. With the Dallas Mavericks, alongside Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving found something that had seemed rare in his recent journey: balance. During the 2023-24 season, when Dallas caught fire on its run to the NBA Finals, Kyrie was more than just an offensive talent. He was a steady presence, decisive, mature in critical moments. In road playoff games, he took responsibility, controlled the tempo, and showed a quieter, more strategic version of his leadership. He wasn't just the unpredictable artist anymore. He was the veteran, aware of the weight of every possession. And that completely changes the narrative. Because when Kyrie plays with absolute focus, he's still one of the most lethal one-on-one players in the league, one of the most creative finishers in the history of the game, and one of the coldest athletes in clutch moments. The question that remains isn't about skill. That debate ended years ago. The real issue is consistency of purpose. Has he finally found the emotional maturity that sustains great legacies? Or are we looking at just another temporary chapter before a new, unexpected rupture? Kyrie never wanted to be predictable. He always wanted to be authentic. And maybe the price of authenticity, in a league that demands total alignment, is carrying labels that oversimplify a personality far too complex to fit into headlines. His legacy is still open. And that alone already makes him one of the most intriguing figures in the modern history of the National Basketball Association. In the end, Kyrie Irving's story isn't just about basketball. It's about identity, ego, conviction, and consequence. He showed us the peak of individual skill, the kind of talent that makes millions fall in love with the game. But he also taught us that genius without clear direction can create turbulent paths. What defines a legacy? Championships, statistics, leadership? Or the courage to stay true to yourself even under global pressure? Kyrie forces us to face that question. And now I want to hear from you. When his career is over, how do you think he'll be remembered? As the genius who decided a historic championship, or as the talent who could have been even greater? Drop a comment down below. I read them all. If this video made you think, leave a like because it helps the channel keep bringing deep stories like this. Share it with that friend who's always defending or criticizing Kyrie. And if you love diving into the soul of the NBA, subscribe to the channel. Because here, we don't just talk about the game. We talk about legacy,